All right, it is 11 a.m. and welcome everyone to the Transportation, Airports, and Public Works Committee meeting. Um, we're going to kick it right off with our stuff here this morning. Welcome to everyone. Thank you. We're asking for the approval of the January 2023, January 23rd, 2025 minutes. Man, I'm having a day. Are there any changes or items that we need to review?
There's no changes for me, Chair Hancock, and I approve the minutes.
So we will move forward with that. Thank you so much. So moving on to the next item on our agenda, it is, there are no consent items, so general business, the Connecting Aurora City Ride Multimodal Transportation Update. Let's go.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Chair Hancock and the member of the committee. My name is Huiliang Lu. I'm a principal transportation planner with Planning Department. I'm also the co-project manager together with Carly Campuzano from Public Works on Connecting Aurora, the city's first ever multimodal transportation master plan. And this is another very important update to the committee. We're halfway through the project. We have completed milestone 1, that is the existing conditions analysis, and milestone 2 is the scenario testing analysis. And we're in the middle of the milestone 3, that is the development of a multimodal transportation network. So today we're going to provide a summary of what we have, the outcome of milestone 1 and milestone 2, and also a presentation on the extensive public engagement on milestone 2. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Keith Bolsheim, the consultant project manager from HDR, to make the presentation. Keith, please.
Thanks, Huiliang. Good morning, everybody. I'm really happy to be back here presenting this update on Connecting Aurora. As Huiliang mentioned, we have made a ton of progress over the last about 14 months on this project. So I'm really happy to be presenting this to you all today. We've got about a 15-minute presentation, and then I think we have time for questions after. So without further ado, I do want to just provide an overview or review of the project as a whole and some of the discussion that we've had leading up to this point. And then, as Huiliang mentioned, we'll talk about the most recent round of public engagement and what we heard from the public about the possible futures that we presented to them in that scenario testing and development. So a reminder, Connecting Aurora is the city's first citywide multimodal transportation master plan. During this project, we are aiming to identify ways to better connect people to the places they need and want to go. We are creating a shared vision for the future of the transportation system in Aurora and guiding the development, design, and delivery of projects and programs for the city, as well as aiming to improve safety and convenience for everybody moving around Aurora. In the spring and summer of last year, we drafted a vision and mission, and as well as some goals for the plan. These received unanimous support from City Council in the fall of 2024. The vision, or really the future that we hope to create through the implementation of this plan, is that Aurora safely connects all people to our places for a healthy, sustainable, and economically strong community. Our mission, which reflects the day-to-day actions that the city will take to make that vision a reality, reads: the City of Aurora will provide a complete transportation system to meet the needs of all people. The city will engage the public in the delivery of plans, programs, policies, standards, and projects. We've also identified these 10 goals that represent the specific and measurable outcomes for the transportation system. These help us stay focused on actions that help us achieve that vision that I just presented. These goals include goals that focus on how well the transportation system performs for the people using it, so making it safer, more reliable, more convenient, and better connected. Some of the goals refer to how our transportation system impacts overall city aspirations of being sustainable, economically strong, and healthy. And finally, some of the goals refer to the way in which the transportation system is built, so helping to create authentic places, providing equitable services, and being well integrated within the community. So those are the 10 goals that help us track our progress towards achieving that vision. Brief overview here of the overall process. So as Huilang mentioned, we made it through kind of those first 2 phases of the project, what we call the discover and synthesize phases of the project, where we learned about the city's transportation strengths and weaknesses, and really kind of started to think big about what our transportation future might hold. We're currently developing and analyzing the proposed future multimodal networks, including bike, transit, and vehicular networks, as well as freight. And later this spring and summer, we'll develop the project lists that are needed to build out those networks, as well as an implementation plan to help us fund and see those networks through over the next 10 to 20 years. All of that aiming for council adoption later this year. Okay, so I'm going to spend a few minutes here talking about these kind of what our future might hold and the scenarios that we developed to kind of analyze what might happen here in the city of Aurora, to the city of Aurora, partly. There are trends that are happening that are kind of outside of the city's control, as well as, investments and policy decisions that we can make as a city that can help shape how those trends impact people and how they move around the city. And then at the end, we'll talk about how the public reacted to these possible futures. So these imagined futures, there were 3 that we presented to the public. They feature intentionally extreme outcomes. So these are based on policy and investment choices that are available to us. And it really helps having these kind of intentionally extreme scenarios helps us kind of bookend what investments really matter for the city and policy choices really matter for the city, kind of no matter what other external forces and how those might impact the city's choices. So seeing how, for example, a car-oriented city might impact congestion around the city, or major investments in transit might change the way people move. These are big picture scenarios, and we're kind of applied blanket across the city. And we used travel demand model to test these scenarios and analyze some of the impacts of these kinds of investment choices. So the first one I mentioned is car-oriented city. Really, this is kind of the status quo for the city. In this scenario, we imagined a future where Aurora continues to grow much as it has in the past few decades, generally expanding a little bit further to the east in largely single-family neighborhoods. So development patterns that match what we've seen over the past couple decades. These neighborhoods typically require people to use a car to go most of the places they want to go. The transportation grid would be less direct. There are circuitous streets, curvilinear grid, like we see in many of our neighborhoods today. And generally, this means that people have to travel out of their way to reach many of the places, especially people who are walking and biking. In this scenario, most destinations are within easy reach by car, but people walking and biking and riding transit have limited options within easy reach, partly because those destinations are more spread out because of the land use patterns, and partly due to the scarcity of those alternative mode networks. The second scenario that we tested was called the transit-oriented city. In this scenario, the city makes policy and investment choices that promote the development of a more robust public transportation network and services. The city incentivizes transit-oriented development around those services, and those developments would tend to have a greater mix of land use types and a greater mix of densities. In this future, the transportation grid would be more direct and well-connected, especially for pedestrians and bicyclists. Less of the curvilinear grid and more of the typical street grid that you might see in older cities. This allows people walking and biking to travel further in the same amount of time since they spend less time moving out of direction. Driving is still easy for most trips, and people and the improvements to the other networks, including walking and biking, mean that people using those modes of travel would have greater access to opportunity, not just in their neighborhood, but also around the city. And then the final scenario that we analyzed, we called the neighborhood-oriented city. In this scenario, the city would make policy and investment choices that focus future development on infill sites, that create neighborhood-oriented town centers with a complete mix of land uses within easy reach for people walking and biking. In addition, when the city grows further to the east, there would be incentives and policy carrots and sticks that might incentivize those new neighborhoods to look a little bit like this too, with these kind of mixed use town centers. Again, the transportation grid would be more direct and well-connected, meaning less out of direction travel for people walking and biking. City would make additional investments in public transportation in this scenario that allows convenient connections between these kinds of town centers in these places. In the future, driving to most of these places would still be easy, but again, access to opportunity for people walking and biking increases dramatically. So those are the three scenarios that we've developed and tested. We presented these three future scenarios to the public in late fall of last year. Through various methods of engagement, we were able to achieve over 150,000 touch points and had 1,300 people actively engage with our online open house. We also had 155 people fill out the online survey. The social media campaign reached more than 70,000 people, and we used several other outlets to get the message out, including messages in the water bill, newsletters, bus bench ads, and additional outreach and presentations. We did hold 2 in-person open houses at schools around the city, hosted a virtual town hall and a roundtable discussion at the AMC. The roundtable was a really successful event where the public actively engaged with the project with members of various boards and commissions, city staff, and from a wide array of city departments, as well as the project team in small table discussions in order to highlight the issues that mattered most to those folks. We also presented information at 8 pop-up events at food banks, clinics, rec centers, and other locations kind of around the city. During those events, we engaged with more than 250 people face-to-face. So, we did reach a wide cross-section of the city. These are the results from the online survey, as well as we did have some in-person surveys filled out. And that survey was really filled out by a wide cross-section of the city, including more than 50% non-white participation, as well as people from each ward and with varying backgrounds. When we asked folks on that survey how they thought each future would impact their overall quality of life, both the neighborhood-oriented city, shown here in green, and the transit-oriented city, shown here in orange, received much more positive feedback than the car-oriented city. So people thought that those 2 scenarios would have a better impact on their overall quality of life. We asked a few more specific questions about how these potential futures might impact older adults, youth, people with disabilities, overall city prosperity, and people's ability to move around the city, as well as people's personal safety and comfort. Again, when we asked those questions, people indicated a preference for the neighborhood and transit-oriented cities over the car-oriented city. So what does all this mean? After gathering that input and conducting this analysis, we are moving forward with projects and multimodal network development that really are resilient to these potential futures and would work in any of these possible futures, or in, you know, a future that's likely a more likely outcome, some future in between, right? And so we're developing these multimodal networks that really serve any of those futures. And that's what we're doing over the next month or two. And then we will also be drafting some policy and program recommendations that really reflect the values that we've heard from the community throughout this outreach. And we will be presenting all of those recommendations really quickly, actually, in the next couple of months. We're looking at kind of this April timeframe for our next, what we're calling milestone 3 of public engagement efforts, to kind of present all those recommendations. During that milestone, we'll be employing many of the strategies that we employed in the fall. We found that we had really good engagement through those strategies, and we'll be employing many of those similar strategies in the spring here. One thing I do want to call out is the Engage Aurora Live event, which is scheduled for April 19th. That's the citywide combined public open house, where we will be presenting along with 3 other projects that are important to the city, and kind of allowing that opportunity for folks to come and engage with city staff on multiple projects at once. Okay. We also, throughout the rest of the project, will continue to check in with this committee at key decision-making milestones to confirm the approaches we're taking. We have planned for multiple touch points in spring and summer as we further develop the plan, and we'll share a draft of the plan with this committee and with the rest of City Council, aiming again for that adoption in late fall of this year. So that is my presentation. Thank you all for your time today, and I do believe we have some time for some questions now. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see everybody.
So, do you have any questions?
Yes, Chair Hancock, can I ask a couple questions and make a comment? Okay, Keith, I appreciate your this presentation. I think this is fantastic. We have to look into the future in multimodal modes. What I don't see in your presentation, and I haven't seen it since we've developed this, is I think more people would take transit if it was on time, if it was a little bit safer. I went on transit, the light rail last week, and to get downtown. And it was horrible. I might as well have driven. It took me almost an hour to get downtown, and I did it because of the weather. So that's some conditions where people would take transit instead of driving. Also, when you have to do certain transfers, the lighting is bad. It's not really, to me, a safe thing. So I probably won't be doing it until things get a little bit better in terms of the times. We don't talk about that, and I think that that should be a question. I mean, and I don't see that. You guys are talking about all of this other stuff, but some of the transparency and the reality is, if transit was on time and if transit could get you to the locations of where you need to be, would people take transit? That's not a question I see. You guys are putting all this great stuff up, but there's some realities with our current transit system that I think should be told to people who may want to take transit for whatever reasons to go to their different places. And ever since we've been doing this presentation, I never see that in the presentation or a question addressed to that. So that's just a comment that I have on that, and asked, and I know you guys already have everything spilled out, so that probably won't ever be a question that would be asked, but that's going to be a big deal. On-time transit, safety of the transit system. So I think that that's important. And then when we come to the BRT part, I just want to bring this up. I know this is not part of this. You know, we hear a lot of businesses that are going to be impacted. As we're building out our transit network and grid, I think it's going to be important for the city to ensure that they're engaging with businesses, to make sure that as we're building things out, we're not going to lose businesses in the city. So we're seeing that that's what's happening along the Colfax corridor. A lot of businesses are afraid, even on from the Denver side and through the Aurora side. So I just want to add that in there. And thank you so much for the presentation. I think it's good to have a vision, but I do think that there's some realities that I'm not sure if it's being pointed out. So thank you.
Well, I
Yeah,
do think
thank
that's
you,
a necessity.
Councilmember
Would you
Lawson.
care to comment on that, Keith?
Yeah, I would love to, and I know that maybe Hui Liang and Tom might want to jump in here too. But so one of the key aspects of the goals that we've developed is this. Um, I didn't have it on screen today, but our goal for safety actually calls out. I, I don't have it in front of me exactly, but I believe I have it memorized, which is people are and feel safe using our transportation system. And so personal safety is a really important thing that we have heard from not just this committee, but also from the community as a whole. So it is top of mind actually, and we do need to emphasize that more in these presentations and in our plan as a whole. As you know, RTD has struggled over the last few years with funding. And one of the key aspects of this plan will be identifying potential funding strategies to help mitigate some of those funding shortfalls that RTD has experienced. That's one of the reasons that we see poor on-time performance from RTD is a lack of drivers. And their ability to hire and retain drivers has been severely impacted over the past decade, I would say. And so trying to think through strategies that the city can implement to help address that concern. The city does not necessarily get to tell RTD how to run its business, but there are opportunities for the city to jump in, and potentially there are things like Longmont buys service from RTD and pays from the city budget to buy additional service and help pay those drivers. So those are options that we are considering as we develop these kinds of policies and program recommendations that might help to address some of those issues.
Chair Hancock, can I just do a follow-up? Keith, and I understand that I sat on the RTD Reimagine for many, many years, so I already kind of know what those issues are. So, but what I'm saying is that in these presentations, there has to be some realities as well. And I don't see that. I see a lot of fluff and great things, but those are some issues. The funding with RTD, the city needs to work with RTD. How can we contribute to that? We want to do all these TODs and have everybody take transit, but the reality is that the transit is not in a great side of things, just due to what you stated. But how those realities to me have not been in these PowerPoints. So that's all I wanted to say on that.
Okay. Thank you.
If I might just add that, great question, Councilmember Lawson. Number one is that right now we're developing the network, including a transit network. So the next step after that is projects and programs. That's where we're going to be really focusing on how we can make the transit safe, reliable, and connected to all the destinations. And programs, how we can work together with RTD in terms of funding and how to, as Keith mentioned, the safety, a lot of other things. And also during the milestone one of the project in terms of existing conditions analysis, in those surveys, pop-ups, we did ask those questions in terms of what people think about in terms of improvement. What are the improvements needed on transit? We heard a lot, especially like in Ward 1, where when we were at the MLK and the Fletcher Plaza, where we had those boards for people to put the dots. Transit has been a major concern to many of those people. So we do hear those, and great question again, and we're going to focusing on that specifically in the next phase of the project, of the program and project.
What I would like to see is more detailed analysis to Councilmember Lawson's point and I know that there's limitations to what you can do in terms of how RTD runs its business, but what people are really looking for is, like, when I take the train, to Councilmember Lawson's point, it shouldn't take half the day to get where I need to go. And consistency in the scheduling, like, I noticed that on the at the 9 Mile station, they actually use buses to take you from the 9 Mile station to the Florida station. Why are they using buses when we should be getting on the train? I'm just, and there's no notification of when transit issues happen so that people can prepare, because folks, this is their only mode of transportation. They're trying to get to work and the train's not working, or it's not on time, or they've got unexpected difficulties. You know, my husband and I came in from the airport. The airport, we took the train because we thought, oh, this will be convenient. We don't have to worry about paying for parking, dot, dot, dot. We get home, train's not working. So we ended up having to take an alternative mode of transportation, which is really inconvenient because, you know, we want people to take public transport. We want them to know that it's accessible, reliable, safe, you know, that the scheduling is exactly what they say it's going to be. So I think it's important for us to really detail that, key, and just tell people, look, this is top of mind for us too. We can't wave a
Mhm.
magic wand and make things happen, but here's the reality that we want you to understand that we understand. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Understood.
Because I mean, I like the intent, I like the ambition, I like what you're doing. I just want, at the end of the day, I don't want this to be a fluffy imagination thing. We need to deal in realities because of the folks that have to use this. So let's keep chipping away at that, and just, like, you know, come to us with some more details that get down to the nitty gritty of people's realities and what they're doing as they're taking transportation. I think it'll incent people to participate more. Anything else? Any other comments?
So
Council,
Janine has her hand. Yeah.
Chair Hancock, Janine Rustet, Director of Planning and Business Development. I hear your point on the getting notifications of shutdowns. We have a quarterly standing meeting with RTD, and we are asking them to help us by giving us the notice ahead of time and working with our communications department to help get that word out. So if you experience particular difficulties, please reach out to myself, Laura Perry, Cindy Collop. We all attend these meetings, and it helps us form that better partnership.
Will do. Okay, if there's nothing else, let's move on to the roadway maintenance program update. Nick, Michelle.
Yes, good morning, Chair Hancock, Councilmember Lawson, and everyone attending the meeting today. Uh, so sorry, my presentation went misbehave. Allow me to restart that. So, but yes, I am presenting the 2025 roadway maintenance update. Here we go. All right. And my name is Nicholas Johnson. I'm an engineering supervisor over in Public Works Operations. I oversee the third-party contracts for roadway maintenance, including concrete work, asphalt work, and surface treatment technologies. Some quick facts about the city. We are a very large, 400 plus thousand population city, spanning 165 square miles. And we oversee just under 1,400 centerline miles of roadway. Now, one of the terms I would like to go over real quick is centerline miles is, you take Buckley and you drive north to south, how far you drove is a centerline mile. I use lane miles in my work a lot to help pinpoint costs a little better. And that's, for 1 mile that you drive on Buckley, there are 4 lanes and a turn lane for that mile. That would be 5 lane miles of road maintenance that has to be done. And if at any point the units that I'm using start to flow together, please just speak up and I'm more than happy to clarify them. Our roadway network has been growing quite a bit. From 2006 to about 2017, we had some nice steady growth. we were able to very quickly predict kind of what our roadway maintenance was going to look like during that time. I want to point out that since 2020, we've noticed quite a bit of growth acceleration similar to the early 2000s boom. And so we are working with all of our allotted budget and all of the methods that we have to make sure that we adequately take care of this growing network as best we can. With that, you can kind of see local roads take up a large portion of our network, followed closely by the collectors, which are connecting the neighborhoods together and getting everyone to the arterial so they can get across town and to the locations they need to. Arterials tend to take up the bulk of our budget because they impact that quality of life for our citizens the most. So how we decide where we do our roadway maintenance. We utilize a pavement management system. So we have a computer database where we are tracking the conditions of the roadways when we get citizen calls about issues, when we talk to our other maintenance personnel within the city where they notice trouble areas, and we include all of that in our decision-making process. But we also get some assistance from the technology kind of prompting us towards, it'd be good for you to go in and do some pavement preservation on this road or an overlay on this road. And so we bring all that together on the human side and develop our maintenance program so that we can provide, the best quality program for the best budget that we have. A lot of what guides us is a system called the Pavement Condition Index, which is a grade scale from 0 to 100 of how well the road rides. So a 100 is a brand new, freshly paved road, and a 0 is an open field. The goal for most places is to keep themselves above a 60 on roads, because at 60, that ride quality deteriorates very, very fast. Lots of comments, and we're very close to having to rebuild roadways. So we try very hard to keep ourselves 70 and above. We have a council goal from a couple of years ago of trying to keep our roadway network up to a 73 and maintain it there. We're currently at a roadway network of 72 after several years of very hard work and digging ourselves out of a maintenance hole where we had deteriorated down to a 69. And just so you can kind of see a little bit, the pavement condition index is not something that I'm just developing to make sure I hit the roads that I want. We have third parties go out periodically and drive our entire roadway network and give me a score of how we're doing. And I check that against what I think we should be based on the roadway maintenance that I've done in about the 3 years in between each check. We are getting a roadway assessment done this year, which will help inform our next 5-year plan. And it will help us really focus these budget dollars as we move forward. I wanted to show you a couple of examples of what a roadway condition looks like. So on the left here, where we have a PCI of 75, some things that you'll notice is there are some cracks. You'll see some of the black snake crack seal going across it, but the ride is smooth and you're not noticing any potholes or, ideally to a traveling public that's not a roadway specialist, they won't even notice the road they're driving on. As we get to a pavement condition of 70, you'll notice there's a few more stress cracks. Again, the traveling public hopefully does not notice a road at a condition of 70, and it's something that those of us who are very focused on road maintenance would start to notice that shift. But it's still a good road. It's one that we would probably want to go through and do like some crack seal or some more minor surface treatment on to make sure that we're maintaining it at this level. As we drop down to a PCI of 60, you'll notice that the cracks aren't maintained. Crack seal would not fit in those cracks very well. It would take a lot of product to try to smooth that out, and potholes have developed. And we're starting to see some problems that go all the way down into the subbase, the rock that's underneath the road. And then as we get to even further, a pavement condition of 50, and these are all locations from around the city that we've dealt with in the past. You can see large patches, lots of cracks forming in different patterns, showing just that underneath the road, we're starting to have problems. And that gets into a whole different kind of rehabilitation. And I'll kind of show you some comparisons on what it takes to bring a road like this up to the standard that we're trying to maintain. And that will, I'll show those kind of comparisons here in just a little bit. But what you can see, especially as we're going through those pavement condition examples, is the life cycle of the roadway. So for a good chunk of the pavement's life, it will drop from 100 down to about a 70 over a course of 12 to 15 years. So we've got a pretty good life expectancy on that early bit there, where we just need to maintain it and hopefully keep bumping that curve up a little higher, so that we are just taking care of what's entrusted to us. As we get past that initial plateau, the condition drops off precipitously, and we can go from a good road network to a rough road network pretty quickly. So one of the things that we do when we intervene in these is you'll notice there's this line that's now kind of parallel and above. That is showing where a road would have been given like a mill and overlay to bring it back up to that higher quality ride. And that really extends our life out even further. And so the balancing act that we are running is trying to stay out of that precipitous decline and up into where preventative maintenance and standard mill and overlay will keep us with a functioning network for a very long time. We have done a lot of good lately. In 2022, our PCI was rated as a 69. In 2023, we were presented with the Build Up Aurora initiative, and asked to really focus on getting our roadway network back up to snuff. And a lot of that was in our local roads. And with all of that, we were able to really push our network back up to a target of 71 at this point. My goal is to get us to a 73 over the next couple of years, and then maintain the roads in that condition. Once we get the roads where we're maintaining them, each dollar goes a lot farther. It's the digging out that is very difficult to do, which is why over a couple of years of very focused effort, we've raised by about 3 PCI points. And really, I don't know how much your citizens have talked to you about it as someone that deals with the road operations call center a little bit. I have noticed a change in the tone that citizens have when they call about road qualities. They're much more curious and positive about the road network right now, which I love. I love being able to sit there and explain to them, this is how the plan is going. These are the long-term goals. This is what will take us into your neighborhood win. And it's just really helped compared to when I started in 2022 with this group, and the sky was falling and everyone was very nervous about their neighborhoods, as they should have been at the time. So 2009, we were fantastic. We had a smaller road network. We had good dollars. We were maintaining ourselves at about a 77 PCI, which is unheard of. I know of very few cities in Colorado that are anywhere close to that. There's a big change between 2009 and 2022. Things that happened in that time is the city experienced very rapid growth. We pulled in some county roads that needed some tender love and care. We also had some budget constraints that happened around 2016 from the economic downturn. And we had to make some hard decisions about how we maintain our roads, what we maintain. The directive that this group was given at the time was make sure our arterials are functioning, our emergency routes. We've got police and fire going where they need to go. And then keep the neighborhoods as safe as we can, as drivable as we can, knowing that we're going to have a drop off. And that's one of those decisions, when we're sitting at a roadway network of 75 or so, saying, okay, let's prioritize these areas and neglect these other areas, we'll be okay for a couple of years. The roads can handle, a couple of years of missed cycles. But once we get into, 4 or 5 years of missed work, that's when everything starts to show up, and it starts to show up very drastically and all at once. And that's when we drop to that 69. We've been working very hard, thankfully, with a lot of input from City Council about ways that we can maintain the city in the best way, get back to handling our local roads as well as our emergency routes. And there's been some marked progress. Some of the options that I get to use when I'm maintaining these roads, we've got our crack fill. I've had residents describe it to me as the black snakes across the road. That is what it is, but they go in, they keep water from getting down below the roadway, and it really preserves the life of the road if we do crack seal at the right time. Let's say we've got a few more cracks, or it's the surface itself is getting a little older, a little rougher, and we need to do something to take care of it, but we don't need to go in and remove a layer. We have several surface treatment technologies where we go in, put down some tar and rejuvenator, maybe some rock to make a slurry, and it makes a nice covering over the top of the road, really extends the life, and is a lot more bang for buck than we can get for mill and overlay. Now, every year we're going to have to do mill and overlay for a section of the roads. That's just part of the aging infrastructure. We can't beat time. So we're going to have mill and overlay as a very large part of our roadway program every time. And it is a very drastic improvement to the conditions whenever those go through. We'll be going into some of those roads that are maybe a 60 or a 65 PCI, and a mill and overlay will bring that surface up to a 95 or above PCI, and makes a whole neighborhood feel brand new. I love the change that we get to see when that happens. Now, if a road is neglected for too long, just taking care of that top layer of asphalt and changing that out, that's like changing the tires on a car with the engine going out. It's only going to help you so much. Your ride might feel a little better, but all of that delayed maintenance is going to show up very drastically. And eventually we're going to have to completely dig out the road, remove all of the layers of asphalt, and put in a brand new road. That is, of course, the most expensive thing we can do on the maintenance side. And it is what I spend a lot of my balancing time fighting against, trying to make sure I do the absolute minimum reconstruction possible, because that's the most responsible use of the dollars entrusted to this group. Here's a graph of kind of the relative costs for a lane mile to handle a lot of this. So that thing where it says crack seal, patching, rejuvenator, and rejuvenator, that's a lot of those really easy. We can do a lot of roads for not a lot of money and cover a lot of network if we can keep our road quality where I can use those strategies. Slurry seal and chip seal, again, a lot of bang for buck. I can do a lot of lane miles for, $1 million. I can do several, nearly 10 lane miles worth of work there. Now we get into mill and overlay, and we have two kinds of pavement asphalt that we use in the city. For our collectors and our local roads, we use what's called standard asphalt. It's what everyone's used to seeing. On our arterials, we use a slightly more expensive and much higher quality product called stone matrix asphalt. It lasts longer. It's a longer life. It does not need a lot of the rejuvenating and slurry seals that regular HMA needs. But because it's a higher quality product, it's a higher upfront cost, which is why you start to see that jump in between the two methods there. They're both mill and overlay. It's just the quality and expense of the product that needs to go down. And we do balance when we use SMA based on the amount of travel that's expected. And if we're going to get the traffic on the road that's needed for the stronger asphalt. And then at the very bottom is reconstruction, and it kills a budget. A lane mile. This is a very conservative estimate.
No, I'm listening to a city council committee meeting. I'm like, late on the agenda.
So this can run you very easily almost $500,000 a lane mile for a reconstruct. So this is even a little conservative on this bar chart here for what the costs will be relative to each other. All right, so to get ourselves out of that 69 PCI hole and up to the 71 that we're at now, we had to utilize what's the worst roads and can we get them up into a higher condition as fast as possible. So it wasn't so much work balancing for those especially that 2023 year. It was just finding those worst roads, worst neighborhoods, and hitting them hard and making sure we bring them up to quality. Now that we're past that, we're starting to get into this apply the appropriate strategy at the appropriate time, really stretching these maintenance dollars that we have and making sure that we keep our network the best that we possibly can. Anytime I look better than Denver, I love it. A little bit of program history, just to kind of reiterate some of the points that I was putting in throughout the presentation earlier. Prior to 2015, we had a good budget split between the major streets and the neighborhood streets. We really started going with PCI methods and the PCI grading system in 2015, and we're adjusting our program accordingly. Unfortunately, 2016, we were hit with that budget downturn, and we were given the directive to just maintain what we have. Then 2022, we got the Build Up Aurora initiative with the certificates of participation. We used those funds to address a lot of the deferred maintenance that was really making it rough for some of the neighborhoods in our city. We have moved on so the certificates of participation were a great one-time influx of funding to make sure we could dig ourselves out of that hole. We've shifted to a transportation maintenance fund now, where we've consolidated several different programs and financial lines into 3 core groups. We've got concrete repair, street maintenance, and then our in-house team handling some street maintenance as they need to. We are using this transportation maintenance fund to shove us toward that PCI of 73 for our entire network. It's a big push. We're hoping to get there in the next year or two, if all goes well. But yeah, it's been a lot of hard work by the team. It's been fantastic seeing just the drastic changes over these quick couple of years, but we're still pushing ourselves. Just kind of a comparison. So 2025 with this TMF and no more COP funds really, we're moving into kind of a steady state operation. We know what our budget's going to be very consistently for the next 5 years. We've got a clear line of what we're going to be granted from council as an expectation, and it's going to have us maintaining things well. As you can see, in 2023, we had nearly double the amount of road work that we're doing this year. 2023 and then 2024 were both very intense years for our roadway maintenance program. This year is going to be a big year, but not nearly as strenuous as the last couple of years were. With that, these are the budgets that we have been allotted to do this maintenance program. In total, it's just under 31.5 million to do this project or couple of projects. The phases that this is going to go in is we're going to have a couple of concrete programs come before council in the next month or so. And then once the concrete has been able to get a head start, we will start in with our surface treatment and our asphalt work. And those are on a renewed contract. So we're able to roll over that work. We don't have to go out to bid for those two, which really cuts down on our time and our ability to get out in the nice weather as soon as we've got enough concrete ahead of them that they won't catch up. And with that, that was a very lightning fast, quick introduction to roadway maintenance in the city. I am more than happy to dive into any further questions that anyone here has on those or clarifications that might need to be made.
Hi, Keith. Thank you. This is Councilmember Lawson. I just had a quick question for you. When you're looking at the road maintenance and what needs to be done, do you factor in like new development? Like, for example, when you go down Chambers by the city, we're going to have the Sprouts there, and there's just a ton of apartments. And that's going to be a lot more people who are going to be moving there, therefore using our roads, which the more people you have on the roads, the more deterioration you can have as people are driving. That goes for me as well at East Bank. There's going to be 200 apartments. You know, that's going to add a lot of traffic that's going to be on the roads. When you're looking at this, do you factor into, look at those type of things when you're looking into what needs to be road maintenance for now and in the future?
A little bit. So we have very robust road building requirements. So thankfully, any development that's going in that has to do any road work or anything, they're going to have a very good, solid foundation so that we should just be taking care of the surface or maybe the surface and a little bit below on our arterials. We do try to make sure we're coordinating with development review, planning, Aurora Water, and several other departments across the city whenever we do these projects to make sure that we're not going to have a conflict of utilities where we had just done a new road that was avoidable, or that let's say there's some work in a ward that is very key to public health that needs to go on, but they're going to cut up the roads to make it happen. We make sure that we delay there a little bit and then hit them after that work is done so that they get the best infrastructure and the best public health that we can possibly deliver as a city.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate
Absolutely.
that. Is there any other, I don't see, Councilmember Hancock, do you have any questions? I don't think she does.
No, I don't have any questions at
Okay.
this time. I'm sorry,
Okay.
I'm getting a blood draw, so I'm sorry.
That's
Oh,
okay.
goodness.
That's all right. So thank you so much, Keith. We appreciate it. We're going to go to the next item. And who's presenting on that?
Hi, Councilmember Lawson. This is Jacob Cox, Director of Development
Oh,
Services. I believe
okay.
the
Hi,
next one
Jacob.
was,
Sorry.
is it the fiber item next?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Thanks. That'll be me.
Okay.
Again, Director of Development Services, everybody. Good afternoon, nearly afternoon here. So we wanted to provide a quick update. We've been to this committee in the past year. We've been doing a lot of work with the stakeholder engagement with the fiber providers that work in our city and some new providers that would like to come into the city. So we've got a status update for you all, just an informational item. Let me pull up my PowerPoint. I'm glad Mr. Johnson's here in case I need to pull him in for any specific roadway questions. Good segue, Nicholas. All right. So, you all seeing this okay? Okay, so kind of I'm going to go over why and where fiber, what is it, how is it installed, permitting and current process improvements, fiber SOP, our system and process upgrades, the pilot standards we put together in the last 6 months, and then talk through some stakeholder feedback that we received in terms of those standards that we've developed with our stakeholders. So what is fiber? It's a method of transmitting information optically. It's infrared or visible light. Most of us are probably on a fiber connection right now. It's a much more reliable internet connection. Very important for the city in terms of a lot of our infrastructure, our traffic signals, for example. Previously, information was transmitted via cabling, and so this is a much more efficient means of transmitting data. So voice, video, telemetry, and data. It is a higher bandwidth and can support higher internet streaming. And so obviously we want to be nimble and meeting those customer demands because it's a really good thing for our residents to have in the market. How is it installed? So traditionally, our fiber installations and across the country, the typical installation method is boring. And so we've got that's directional boring underground. It's a 30-inch depth. That's our minimum per our roadway manual. Our roadway manual is our engineering specification guide that kind of guides how we review civil documentation, such as fiber, and how we review for roadway standards. And so additionally, the city requires fiber conduit to be placed for future installations to support city functions. And this is something that we're always talking to developers, particularly as we build out the Northeast with a lot of the greenfield development areas. We want to get ahead of this so that we're preparing for that. The last thing we want to see as a jurisdiction is that new roadways are torn up, or if Nicholas's team has just gone in and done a mill and overlay in a neighborhood, we don't want to see those roadways torn up. That's not something that's good for us as a jurisdiction or the residents. So the permitting process, I'll walk a little bit through this in terms of our standard operating procedures, the system, and the process upgrades we've made. So fiber is permitted through the master license agreement. So each provider that does business in the city has a master license with the city in order to come in and then request civil construction documents to pull permits. And so that's where they pull public improvements permits to work in our right of way. And so we've got a master license on file for every provider that currently does business in the city. And then any new providers would need to meet those requirements. And that also stipulates requirements to go in if they need to, for example, tear up landscaping in somebody's yard. It would stipulate what they need to do to kind of rectify those situations for residents as well. It includes a fiber plan set review, individual engineering submittals per application, and then, like I said, the public improvements permits for work in right of way. The fiber applications are required to adhere to the city's codes and criteria, and we've worked to update those again to meet market demands. We want to be very nimble with meeting those market demands, but we also need to ensure the integrity of our infrastructure. All fiber optic companies must be treated fairly and equally. That's also very important. What we do for one company must be allowed for all companies. So any parameters we put out, we cannot allow anything that's a proprietary installation technique or technology. We've had providers come to us in the last couple of years where they had a specific equipment or instrument that they had a very proprietary method of installing. We can't allow that kind of installation. It needs to be broadly, universally applied so that every provider has equal opportunity to come in and do business in our jurisdiction. In 2023, we processed 131 fiber applications. In 2024, we also kind of halfway through the year, we made an upgrade to our system. And so we did a total of 217 applications in 24, and then we're on pace to probably meet or exceed that number in 25. So we've done hundreds of fiber applications around the city, and these are in every council ward in the city. And so we're actively working with providers, and those providers do adhere to our standard requirements that we've had for some time now. So our system and process upgrades. So the standard operating procedures in 2022, the city implemented the initial fiber SOP, which included the community industry outreach component. The document summarized the process and most of the relevant criteria. Obviously, we're in a culture of constant improvements in terms of reacting to stakeholder engagement feedback. And so in 23 and 24, based on some of those the feedback we received from applicants and providers, we updated some Aurora water standards and criteria as well to help meet some of the infrastructure protection demands that Aurora Water needed to see. And we always vet those with the community. In 2024, primarily we updated our Amanda system, so the business processing system, to have a better customer portal for doing fiber applications. And so we've seen vast improvements, I think, and hopefully the fiber community feels the same. I think it's a very improved, streamlined process, and with the implementation of new review technology. And this is bringing it into alignment with how we review normal development-related site plans, civil plans. It's all in the same system now. And so now we've got a very consistent approach. These were previously done a little bit more offline, and it was causing some issues. So we've got them very consistent now. Sorry, I skipped ahead. So some of the alternative fiber installation techniques here. So in 2022, 23, and 24, we conducted multiple field visits with our colleagues in Public Works and the streets team, as well as our team on the land review side that conducts the license agreement reviews, and our engineering team. And we met with fiber providers in the field and other jurisdictions to kind of take a look at how they were installing things. And again, to try and meet some of the market demands. We've always required the traditional boring. We were getting a lot of pressure and requests from some of the providers to to take a look at micro trenching. And so that's what we're going to talk about in some of these sections. So we did secure, based on that, it became apparent that we should do a deeper dive. And so we secured an outside third-party consultant to help us do an objective review, some deep research into other jurisdictions' installation methods, the methods of protecting roadway assets, the best practices to support the long-term health of roadways with those alternative installations while meeting the need of the revolving market there. So we retain Roxol Consulting Group. They've provided us in the last year a really in-depth review of current emerging technology regarding the installation of fiber networks to deliver fiber to home, fiber to the premises, and impact of these installations that they may have on our roadway infrastructure. And so that's been in close conjunction with Nicholas and their team over in Street Ops to ensure that whatever we allow in terms of these parameters are going to protect the integrity of those roadways based on the context of the type of road. So some of the things we looked at in this analysis was trenching, the directional bore, once again, the plow and vibratory plow, and that's in more of a landscaped area. I'll show you some examples of that. The micro trench, as I mentioned, we were getting some requests for, and then the missile bore, which is essentially taking from that micro trench in the road over to the resident so they can pull the fiber, and it's basically shooting a missile bore under the sidewalk to not necessarily tear the sidewalk up from the street. So all fiber, again, a reminder that all fiber optic companies must be treated fairly and equally. And so that's been at the forefront when we look at these new technology analyses. So trenching, this has long been adopted by the city. So this is used in more challenging locations, visual protection of existing utilities. It's a 30-inch minimum depth. Directional bore, that's been long adopted by a city. And this is the number one, the primary installation method. This is what most fiber companies have come to be comfortable with in kind of most jurisdictions around the country. It's a little bit more expensive up front. We've heard that feedback. And so that's why some companies are wanting to take a look at micro trenching in certain conditions. And then the plow, vibratory plow, under consideration. We're looking at that. It's not applicable near trees, sidewalks, existing irrigation systems. We're really concerned about this one. For example, if you took a vibratory plow in somebody's front yard and ripped out the irrigation, that's just a maintenance concern that we don't want to inherit. And we don't want to have homeowners have to deal with that either. So 30-inch minimum depth for all of those installations. Microtrench, this has been where we've been receiving most of the feedback recently, and so it's under consideration. We did put together some parameters that I'll walk you all through. Detailed and specifications creation is ongoing in terms of how we best protect our roadway assets, and also what context would best fit for this. For example, we would not allow these for collector and arterial roadways. This would only be for local streets, and it is located within the roadway. And so we've got some concerns for the mitigation. The pavement cuts increase the potential for the thermocycle damage and alligator cracking that Nicholas walked you through and showed you some examples of that sealing. We're concerned about differential settling. And so we just, quite frankly, haven't seen this be a great installation technology and method in this area where we have a lot of freeze thaw cycles. And so there's not a lot of good examples of that. There's been a lot of pressure, I think, on other jurisdictions around us that they're starting to allow some pilots. We are currently looking at trying to do a pilot if they met our parameters. But this is something that we're mainly concerned with: what happens after a few cycles of freeze thaw. What does it look like 3 years down the line? And we want to make sure that we're marrying that up with what Nicholas's team is doing, that we're not creating other burdens down the line for residents and our street ops teams. So I mentioned the missile bore. This is also under consideration, and it really marries up with the micro trenching. So this is paired with that to avoid cuts in the curb and gutter and the sidewalks. And again, local roadways only for this. And this takes it from the micro trench to the edge of right of way outside the sidewalk, so they can then pull those lines into the landscaped area. So some of the pilot standards we put together. So we developed standards with Roxol as our third-party consultant. We looked at how each alternative installation could be used and what context might be the most appropriate. We did a broad stakeholder outreach effort for these standards in late 2024, and we hosted a large meeting that was well attended by a lot of the providers in the region that came and then subsequently sent us a lot of feedback. So some of the outstanding items were explored with internal staff and external stakeholder engagement. location of the pole box to each resident, the microtrenching depth, surface treatment, mill and overlay, flow, flash fill. I'll show you some examples of that. Depending on the timeline for the next surface treatment, that was a big parameter that we worked with the street ops team on. If you did a microtrench, we want that to be ahead of when, for example, the streets team goes out and is already planning to pave a roadway. So ideally, we would work with a provider to say, hey, can you get ahead of our paving schedule so that we don't have those flash fill lines in the road? Because we think that could be an area of complaint from some residents. And so a shared use of microtrench is also ideal. Multiple companies in a single trench. We don't want multiple cuts in our streets. I think that's bad for the integrity of our infrastructure. So the mill and overlay, I talked about a little bit of the parameters of the time frame. So beyond 3 years, so when the pavement rehab is not scheduled or beyond the 3-year plan, mill and overlay is required. So we wouldn't allow that flash fill, which is that thin. It's about a 4-inch line. It's kind of silver in color, and it flows that trench where they've micro trenched. And so local roadways only, not available for collector and arterial roadways. This would essentially, if it was a recently paved road within 3 years, this would bring it to be a very consistent look on the roadway, and we think better maintain that in terms of the integrity of that road. Also, one side of the local roadway, and the plan and profile would be required in special conditions, and that's really to protect our rural water utility assets. That's a review technique that we use to ensure that they're not impacting our water utility infrastructure. So mill and overlay within 3 years. When pavement rehab is scheduled within a 3-year period, no mill and overlay would be required. That would mean that we're going to come through and have it as part of potentially our mill and overlay for our citywide capital program. Local roadways only, again, very similar parameters there, and we would look at plan and profile if there was an impact to or a near proximity to our water utility infrastructure. The vibratory plow, not applicable, as I said, near trees, sidewalks, existing irrigation systems. We would require a 30-inch minimum depth. And just back to these ones, we would require an 18-inch minimum depth for these parameters here. And then on the vibratory plow, considered in more rural parts of the city, we do have roads, particularly in the eastern portions of the city, that might be more of that rural cross section, hasn't been fully developed yet. And so there might be kind of a shoulder landscape surface directly off the asphalt. That's where we would look at the context on whether or not this would be an applicable application. And so what we're really trying to do here is to create a palette of options that is universally applicable to all providers and also meets the demands of the context. So we're just trying to really provide a toolbox of options that also maintain our infrastructure integrity. The hydraulic missile bore I mentioned, this is again paired with microtrench to avoid those cuts in curb, gutter, and sidewalks. It's the same depth as microtrench, so it's 18-inch down is the minimum depth that we provided in terms of our analysis, and local roadways only, not available in collectors or arterials. Joint use of microtrench. This is something that we'd like to see. Some providers do have some issues with this. They want discretion over who's in that vault, and so this is something that we'd like to see. Single cut, consolidated opportunities. We do have some conversations with developers. For example, if they're building new roads, can they do an initial investment to put in some conduit so that joint location can happen within a new road? That's something that we're always trying to be as proactive as possible. So pilot feedback. So I will say we have one proposal right now that we're currently reviewing with our third party and our teams internally. It does not currently meet any of the parameters that I walked you through, but we're currently analyzing that, trying to figure out if we can reach an acceptable approach meeting those parameters. So the pros and cons, the themes of the feedback, this is coming out of our fall stakeholder engagement sessions. The positives on the microtrench, quick installation, it's certainly cheaper for the providers, less design requirements, and that reduced initial cost is why some providers just wanted us to take a look at that. The negatives, and we actually heard, we heard this from both our third party and then also a lot of the feedback we received from providers themselves: longevity concerns, maintenance and long-term durability of the network, loss of service, potential for customers, ADA accessibility for non-compliance if the installation deteriorates. That could be a major issue for the city if that were to occur. Bicycle safety. So we heard from Connecting Aurora just earlier here on this call. We would be concerned about if there was a crack in the roadway. I've seen instances where bike tires fell into that trench, and that created a safety hazard in those roadways with infrastructure that might fail. Restriction to other utilities of future work due to the backfill. It creates a barrier wall so that if it's 18 inches down, that flow fill goes down and actually creates a little 4-inch wall in that void. And so that's a concern for getting utilities through that area. underground. Long-term maintenance costs of the city, potentially. Competitive unfair advantages. We heard this concern from some other providers compared to the traditional installations that they've invested in. That could open us up for legal challenges if it were deemed to be a proprietary technique. And then potential for jurisdictions footing the cleanup bill. That's something that we heard from other providers that have done work around the country. So some example photos from some neighboring communities. So these are in the Denver metro area, not in Aurora. The two images on the left, they're a little fuzzy, but that white line that you're seeing is kind of where a flow fill had occurred, and you start to see that crack opening up. And these are probably 2 years old in terms of that micro trench. And then you see what we're trying to avoid with that missile bore potential technology is that, you know, avoiding these kind of cuts along the sidewalk. That could open up potential for some ADA hazards and compliance issues for us. So these quotes are directly from stakeholders. These are from other providers. I took the company names off, but just to kind of reiterate some of the things that we were hearing. So cost savings, this is around maintenance concerns. So cost savings do not necessarily materialize over time, and repairing the shallow infrastructure leads to potentially higher expenditures than anticipated. So this was from a company that looked at this technology, decided to go away from that and continue with traditional boring. Another provider thought that the pilot revealed significant concerns regarding the maintenance and long-term durability of the network for them as a provider. And then another one was the shallow depth of the micro trenching installations made the fiber cables more susceptible to environmental stresses. And then some comments about the maintenance procedures for our jurisdiction. Some feedback on the ADA and multimodal concerns. Microtrenching instills an inherent risk to bicycle safety, which would be antithetical to our bicycle facility design guidelines. And then not requiring mill and overlay for roadways that are scheduled for maintenance within 3 years creates right-of-way that exposes hazardous pedestrians, tripping potential, compromised wheelchair access, and tire punctures for cyclists. Utility priority and system reliability. There was some concerns about the primacy and utility corridors for future provider companies coming in. The increased potential for time and cost, placing a burden on the other utilities that are already in the right of way. Some comments about the network deployments, that they've had some issues in other municipalities, creating loss of service, stranded customers, cleanup bills. That basically companies that have not wanted to pursue microtrenching because of those long-term maintenance issues for them as a company. And then a comment to reconsider the subsurface engineering requirements for traditional drilling. And then again, I mentioned the equitable access to any technology or parameter we lay out there, but these were some comments about companies not particularly preferring microtrenching as a company, but could be useful tool in the toolbox. And that's exactly kind of how we pursued the parameters we laid out, that it's a tool. It's not good for every area, but we wanted to have a universal approach where it could be a tool that companies could utilize. And then another comment here about the barrier walls and potential for concerns underground. Competitive fairness, once again, not creating unfair advantages for certain companies. And then some comments about granting variances, and that could lead to regulatory inconsistencies and potential for legal challenge for our jurisdiction. So the results, fiber continues to be installed in the city. As I mentioned, we've done several hundred of these applications over the last several years. And so we want to certainly meet the demands of the residents, these companies. And so what we're trying to find here is a balance. We want to protect the integrity of our infrastructure, being nimble with customer and resident needs, and the fiber business market. And it is a constantly evolving market. But we also need to ensure that our parameters of installation regulations are universally available and context driven based on the time of paving, the type of roadway, and when there might be a mill and overlay in the future. And so we are currently reviewing a pilot right now to see if we can get that to meet our current standards. But as a reminder for the folks on this call, we are actively pursuing fiber applications every day. Our team is very busy on currently advancing fiber, and they do comply with our current regulations. So with that, I know that was a lot of information really quickly. I tried to get through. Please let us know if you have any questions.
Jacob, I just have a question.
Yep.
So I definitely think we need fiber. I wish it would get to my area pretty soon, because I'm still on the regular internet stuff. But I guess the question I have for you, this hasn't been approved yet, right? Like the micro trenching, Because
No.
I know that a lot of us are getting people from different companies contacting us. So this hasn't been approved and you're only going to do a pilot right now, correct?
Correct. So the work we did, the parameters I walked through in terms of that,
Okay.
that was our pilot approach to say, under these circumstances, we would allow companies to try microtrenching around the city and local roads in a very limited fashion to see how it might hold up. But we worked through, we did some data analysis around what other jurisdictions were allowing, and we landed on a certain depth and really dependent upon when that mill and overlay paving schedule might occur, and not allowing it for collectors and arterials in particular. But we've not received an application right now that has met those parameters for that pilot. So we are open to exploring it, but we have not allowed a microtrench to occur in the city.
Okay, and if you do allow the microtrench to occur in the city, I'm glad that it would be different providers can apply, but it would still be based on the consumer's choice to decide if they want to go with whoever. Is that correct? If you allowed multiple
Mhm.
companies, like we're not going to be, just one
No,
company is going to take over our neighborhood. If the city decides to go on with microtrenching,
correct.
they will be able to have a choice based on what they want to do. Is that correct? Like we
That's
do with the
correct.
fiber stuff as well.
Yep. And so we
Okay.
do have several companies that we work with every day that do fiber in our city. And so it's really about trying to figure out that toolbox of options so that consumers and residents have an option to choose from with their neighborhoods. And so that's what we're trying to find that balance for right now.
And then just my last question, so if the city moves forward with this, will the ward and you allow this? I'm not saying now you're thinking about a pilot, but if the ward council members will be notified or, in general, and particularly of what companies will be doing this, when this will be happening. I probably won't be on the council my term, this is my last term, but if it's decided, the ward council members in particular will be able to be notified, correct, of the microtrenching companies, when this would occur, the neighbors, the impacts and all of that, correct?
We absolutely
Okay.
would keep you posted on that. Yes.
Okay,
And
I
see,
see.
that's my issue. My issue here with this is I want to be sure that the city is doing what is appropriate. And to your point, Councilmember Lawson, about giving consumers a lot of choice. I think the data is still not totally solidified in terms of the potential harm, risk to that microtrenching does to neighborhoods. And for me, I just feel like technology, innovative, forward thinking, new technology is something we should always be looking at or giving the consumers, especially in the older wards, like in your ward, Councilmember Lawson and mine, opportunities to have new up-to-date technology to keep them on pace with everybody else. And so I have made some inquiries externally because I want to get all the data that we can before we say no to one group and yes to another group, because I don't want us to come off like we're being gatekeepers to technology in our communities. As Jacob, I've expressed to you before, I just want to see us do, Aurora should be like the gold standard for technology as we grow and expand in the city. And that's pretty much my only comment about that. It's just that I want to make sure that we're totally vetting all possibilities so that we can get the best and the brightest technology that's available for our constituents.
Understood. Yeah, we agree, council member. And so we're not saying no. We're trying to figure out how we toe that line between the infrastructure integrity and allowing technology and new services to come in the door for our residents. So we absolutely agree. And we will keep you all apprised to the data. We're continuing to do a deep dive. This has been quite the effort. So we're going back to our third party, and we're going to continue to find some more data that we can kind of look at other jurisdictions. And what we're really trying to find, Councilmember Hancock, is look at some other jurisdictions in the metro area that do have the same climate as us to try and figure out, has somebody had this that's been in the ground for a few years that we can really look at and figure out, does it work for those neighborhoods? That's what we're trying to pull right now.
Great.
Thank you all.
Thank you. I appreciate your due diligence. And it's a continuing, it's like the continuing saga that unfolds in our city. So thank you so much. I know that we're running like way over today because of the presentation. So let's move forward with the Parker corridor improvements and yeah, let's whip right through that, shall we?
Right. Thank you, Councilmember or Chair Hancock and Councilmember Lawson and Councilmember Kassaw. I'm Tom Walker Braddock, Senior Transportation Planner for the City of Aurora. Parker Road is an important road in our city and provides a direct link between Aurora, Denver, and unincorporated Arapahoe County. The Parker Road Corridor Improvement Project has been led by Arapahoe County in strong partnership with the City of Aurora. Jim Katzer from Arapahoe County and Stacy Shore and Leah Langerman from the consulting team are here to share the recommended improvements that resulted from this project. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jim and Stacy.
All right, thank you, Tom, and it's good to be with you this afternoon. I'll go ahead and start the presentation and then turn it over to Stacy. So next slide, please. So this study covers the corridor of Parker Road from Hamden Avenue to Mississippi. And as you travel through along this corridor, you'll go through unincorporated Arapahoe County, Aurora, and a small part of Denver. So the once again, the studies on the north side Mississippi and south side Hamden, and it's kind of bookends a couple, or it's in the middle of a couple other studies that were done previously. This is a State Highway 83, so CDOT is in charge of maintenance and the operations of the highway. We had 3 funding partners for this project. We had federal money, about 1.5 million, and Arapahoe County and City of Aurora contributed just over $100,000 each. Next slide, please. So after existing conditions was performed, the purpose of the project and was to improve traffic safety for all users along the corridor, to enhance multimodal connectivity and improve the travel experience for people walking, biking, and using mobility devices and transit. This corridor, as it's been built up over time, has become a barrier for multimodal activity, and at some level also for vehicular traffic. So the improvements needed to provide safety for vehicular and multimodal traffic. Also, it's previously mentioned connectivity for multimodal, and then also we wanted to enhance the travel experience for multimodal travel. So as we move projects forward, the projects needed to accomplish these goals for the project, and that was to maintain or improve vehicular traffic operations. So this wasn't our main goal, but it was important. Our main goal wasn't to improve traffic operations, but it was to maintain it. So it made a lot other options, or made many options viable for these project goals. Also, we wanted to serve the regional mobility and local accessibility for all modes. This is a really important corridor, and it brings a lot of regional traffic through the area. And then we also wanted to incorporate feedback that we received through the public outreach. So our public outreach included two public engagements. One was a virtual town hall in April 2023, where we introduced the project, had some good participation, and then we had in-person open house at the Stampede. We had great participation at that meeting. And then we had a couple community focus groups, and there was great engagement from the community in those focus groups, a lot of good conversation, and a lot of passionate people that had great ideas that we incorporated in the plan. We also had agency coordination, which includes the people listed here, the groups listed here. And Aurora has been a key player in this project, in this study, and we really appreciate Mac and Tom's involvement with this project. We also had a policy advisory committee that met 4 times and had some great participation there. And we hope to springboard future projects with this advisory committee. So got some buy-in as we went along with the project and received good input from this group. We also had technical advisory committee meetings, 7 of them, that were also fruitful in guiding this effort. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stacy. And sorry I was talking so fast, trying to get through this in 15 minutes.
Thanks, Jim. So we used a tiered process shown here with more details as we progressed. So the alternatives evaluation started with 16 level 1 concepts that were pretty high level concepts that we considered. At level 2, we had 50 improvement options that were location specific. And in the end, we ended up with 36 options recommended to move forward into defined and prioritized projects. So wanted to talk about bus rapid transit along this corridor. This corridor is identified as a BRT corridor by multiple agencies, and this is just a piece of that overall BRT corridor. The BRT corridor goes all the way from downtown Denver to 9 Mile Station. So with that in mind, after level 1, the project team moved the BRT to a recommendation without further evaluation. So that further evaluation that gets into the details of the BRT will be done with that BRT study. However, we didn't just punt this into the future without thinking about it. We, for this study, we used not precluding that BRT as an evaluation criteria with our level 2 options. And the implementation plan will discuss how all of the projects will support and build towards BRT along the corridor. So looking at project development, those options were combined into 16 potential projects, looking mostly at location and connected elements, but also making sure they were manageable size and logical construction project limits. The projects are assigned an overall priority of higher, medium, or less. That was based on purpose, need, and goals that Jim talked about, as well as timing and effectiveness. And then we came up with potential timeframes for each project for short, mid, or long term. So we did not assign specific sources for the funding in our implementation plan because grants and programs change. They both go away as well as new opportunities arise. But you can see here the types of, so we came up with types and categories that are in bold on the left and just some examples of what we were thinking for each of the different funding sources. We are finishing up the study under budget, and so we're utilizing the remaining contract budget to move a few projects forward. So the 4 listed here, we are able to advance analysis and conceptual design layouts to provide more information for agencies to move forward with hopefully funding. So wanted to go over some of the projects. I'm going to go through the higher priority projects in a little more detail and then just list the medium and lesser priority projects. So this is one of the higher priority projects. This is one of 4 new controlled pedestrian crossings that are recommended. The new controlled pedestrian crossings were based on distance between existing signals, also land use across Parker. So when we had generators and attractions across Parker Road, especially for pedestrians and bicyclists, looked at that, as well as field observations, input that we received, as well as data on where people are actually crossing mid-block without signalized control. This at Florida shows we have a lot of going on with Florida improvements, but it shows an example of another of the most common recommendations, which is intersection corner modifications. So Parker Road is a state highway, and so it has a lot of acceleration lanes for right turn lanes, as well as it's on an angle. And so a lot of the intersections are at a skew, such as this. And so we have a lot of pretty fast free rights at the intersections. And so the intersection corner modifications looked at tightening those up, those corners, and removing free rights when the traffic analysis showed that that was possible without having a negative impact on traffic or traffic safety. And the intent is to slow down the speed of traffic, making those turns, increase the visibility of pedestrians and bicyclists crossing there, as well as shortening the crossings at the intersections. This is another location of a new controlled pedestrian crossing. And this is a location where we're furthering concept design. And this location is one of those looking at the separate land uses. So we do have high density housing on the east side of Parker Road and a new Arapahoe County park on the west side that won't have a parking lot. And so we want to make sure that we are making a recommendation to provide options for people to bike and walk across Parker Road. Another controlled pedestrian crossing at Jewel Circle and Jewel Avenue there. And at the project Havana through Yale, there's a lot going on here, but it's an example of another common recommendation that we made, which is for additional raised median on Parker Road. There are locations north of Iliff that have raised median, but looking at where else we can add raised median along Parker Road. And then at Dartmouth, Cornell to Peoria, we have intersection corner modifications like we talked about. Again, raised median, and this is another location of a new controlled pedestrian crossing. This is a location where we see a lot of people crossing. There have been horrible pedestrian crashes here. And so this is a location that we wanted to make sure that we provided some good safety improvements. So medium priority projects are listed here. There's 5 of them, including shared use path. That shows short and midterm because some of it could be done with development along Parker Road instead of, but the intent is to have a shared use path the entire way. Transit improvements, these improvements will build towards that future BRT. A couple intersection improvements at Mississippi and Peoria, as well as bike lanes on Dartmouth and Cornell to facilitate the crossing of Parker Road. And then less priority projects, there's 5, and these are really just less priority, not low, but less priority than others. And that was in the prioritization scoring that we made, really due to higher costs, like the top 2 are higher costs than others, and or lower multimodal benefits. And so that's why these are a little less priority than the others. So looking at next steps, we really want this to be a guide for moving forward projects with funding and implementation. And so we will be documenting everything in an implementation plan. We're doing these presentations. We presented to the Board of County Commissioners. We've completed 3 presentations to Dr. Cog, and then this presentation. And and at the same time, we are advancing that analysis and conceptual design of those few projects. That completes our presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Stacey. I just wanted to mention one last thing is with Aurora's help, we applied for a Dr. Cog set-aside project, and we received an innovative mobility planning grant and a project and the Livable Center grant project along the Florida corridor. So this project's already bearing some fruit in that regard. So with that, I'll end our presentation and take any questions.
How much was that grant?
I think it was up to $250,000, but I misused the word grant. It's a set-aside project, so Dr. Cog is leading the effort, and they'll be hiring the consultant for the work. But I think it was right around $250,000.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Any
thank you.
questions, Councilmember Lawson?
I just have a comment. Stacey, I sit on the Parker Road corridor, so I kind of know about this presentation. I just hope one day, maybe in my lifetime while living in Aurora, that we may be able to do something with the Hamden going north, the zigzag, where you have to cross all the way over to get to northbound 225. Very dangerous situation all the time. So I'm hoping that one day that might be something of a priority and we might get some funding for that. So that's all I want to say on that.
Just to let everybody know, we did, thank you, Councilmember Lawson, and thank you for participating in the study. We did have that. That is one of the items that needs further study. So it wasn't not recommended. However, given the volumes and complexity of that, that will require much more traffic analysis and impact. We started looking at it and it was starting to impact the state park and things like that. So that is one of the projects that was, I guess the result was that it will need further study beyond this before being recommended. But thank you, yes.
I'm glad you have it on your radar because I
Yes.
agree that intersection is gnarly. So yeah, thank you very much. Next we have the IGA and Saria at Gartrell Bridge and the Aurora Parkway Bridge. Can we squish those two together?
Yes, good news. I'm going to squish all three together in this last presentation. So try to get
Rock
everyone out of
on.
here.
Thank you.
I know, I'm sure everybody's very hungry and ready to move on. Okay, so let me just share screen real quick. All right, so I'm Kathy Valencia. I'm the Transportation Manager in Public Works. And today for the last presentation, I'll be presenting three Saria IGAs, intergovernmental agreements that the city is going to be requesting to execute for three projects: the Gartrell Bridge widening, Aurora Parkway Bridge, and the Gun Club multimodal improvements. So for each project, I will do a project overview, the funding update, and a status update. All right, let's start with Gartrell Bridge. Here's the nice exhibit of the new bridge that we're planning. It'll be a 5-lane section over E470. Our funding partners for design was the City of Aurora and Saria. Signal design was by the city and signal construction was through E470. We are at 100% design, just addressing final comments. The traffic signals, the temporary traffic signals are on and operational, and we are planning for construction in 2025 through 2026. Our funding update for this new IGA, you can see we have the original design is nearly complete. We are seeking reimbursement for the design overage through Saria. We have a construction management cost that we have to pay E470 for. We have the estimated construction cost at about 10.1 million. So the new Saria IGA will be for 10.8 million. And then, as I mentioned, our status update, we have 100% plans submitted and just anticipating final design here fairly soon. And then we can get going on construction this year. Next project is the Aurora Parkway Bridge. This exhibit is showing the bridge location over E470. There currently is not a roadway to the bridge. That'll be constructed by developers, but it'll connect Aurora Parkway where it ends at Dry Creek Road on the east, and it'll come across E470 and connect into Parker Road. Let's see, the funding partners for design are Aurora and Saria. The roadway design is by developers, adjacent developers. We are currently at 30% design of the final bridge. Our scope of services did include 100% design of the interim bridge. Timeline, we are at 30% design, waiting for final design to begin once we have better coordination with the developers, because we can't build the bridge without the roadway. So we need to do coordination with the adjacent developers on the roadway. And then so construction is to be determined, but it is developer driven. So for the Saria IGA for this project, let's see, the green text is the adds up all the new costs for that final design, or sorry, for the final IGA, but we have additional design needed. We have additional core relocation construction. And again, that E470 construction management cost, the interim bridge construction cost is a little over $10 million. The new Saria IGA is for $11.5 million. So again, we're at 30% plans completed at currently. We anticipate 18 months to complete the final design, and then we will coordinate with developers for construction. Final project is the Gun Club multimodal improvements. The exhibit there on the right shows the location of this project, which is just east of Quincy Road, and then connects into where Gun Club becomes Aurora Parkway on the south. This project will design a 4-lane roadway section. It's currently a 2-lane section. Ultimate section will be a 6-lane section, but that's far out in the future. We're focusing right now on the 4-lane section. Our funding partners for preliminary design are Surrey and Arapahoe County. For final design, we do have dollars for final design currently. We have a federal grant through Dr. Cog, and Aurora and the city, Aurora and Arapahoe County are providing that local match. So we will be beginning our final design here in the next 6 months or so, and that will take about 2 years to complete. And then construction is to be determined. We will wait on Surrey's construction funding for Gun Club. This is just the funding breakdown. This project will basically get the leftovers of the bonding package for the 3 projects, which comes out to be about 1.7 million. Like I said, we are at final design for this project, and a couple other things we're coordinating currently, transmission line relocation. We're coordinating with Arapahoe County and the adjacent developer on this project, and then we anticipate final design 25 through 27. Just a quick update on the master plan of all the projects. There were 10 projects to start. We've completed 5 of them. So with these new 3 Surrey IGAs, we will be completing 3 more. And then just there's 2 left on the master plan that we have not started yet. All right, so we're at the final question. Does TAP support moving forward the resolutions and intergovernmental agreements for the Surrey IGAs with the City of Aurora to the next available study session? And happy to answer any questions on the project.
I support to move all 3.
Thank you, Councilmember Lawson.
I also support to move all 3.
Thank you, Councilmember Hancock.
Very good. Thank you for that. You did that rapid fast. I'm
Thank you.
impressed. I'm impressed. With that said, with those 3 done, do we have any miscellaneous matters for consideration, Councilmember Lawson?
I have none.
So Cindy or Laura, do we have any anticipated topics that we should be aware of for the next meeting?
I've got that for you. So next meeting in March 20th, we will be doing a update on the neighborhood traffic calming program with actually doing a 5-year before and after study presentation. Hard to believe it's been 5 years since that's been implemented. We're also looking at using criteria. We've been very successful getting grants for filling in missing sidewalk locations. So we want to walk you through a proposed program to identify those high priority missing sidewalks so that we can keep moving forward with more installations of those. In either March or April, we'll have another Connecting Aurora update focused on the network recommendations and potentially IGA with Arapahoe County for a traffic signal at Piccadilly and Plains, which is between Quincy and Hampton on Piccadilly. And then also bringing an item about guardrail criteria and what kind of criteria we're recommending for the installation of guardrail. So those are our items.
Well, fantastic. It sounds like we're going to have a meaty agenda coming up at our next meeting, which is on March 20th at 11 a.m. I thank you, everybody, for all your hard work and your participation and just being here today. Do we have any other questions, comments? Seeing none, woo, we did a lot today. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.